Welcome to Kaiser Watch with John Kaiser. I'm your host, Jim Goddard. John, welcome back. What's coming up on the show today?
Jim, happy to be back. We're going to talk about one of my perennial bottom fish, Vanstar Mining, and how salvation might come from the James Bay region. Plus, we're going to talk a bit about Scandium Mining, which claims to have started some form of construction at its Nyngan project.
Is Vanstar Mining Resources ever going to escape your bottom fish collection and become a KRO favorite again?
Vanstar Mining Resources was made a favorite in mid-2021 when the stock price collapsed after Peter Grandich gave up on the company. He had embraced it in 2020. In 2019, IAMGOLD had published the initial maiden resource estimate for the Nelligan deposit, which Vanstar had discovered as a grassroots discovery in 2010. IAMGOLD had optioned it in 2014. It spent 5 years working on it, and the resource at the end of the day was about 97 million tons of 1 gram per ton, about 3.2 million ounces. And it was a different style of disseminated gold mineralization, not the usual orogenic gold that you see in these parts of Quebec. And they won the AMEQ Discovery of the Year award at the time. And Peter Grandich saw all those ounces, and during that COVID year when gold took off, he embraced it big time, helped promote it to $1.75 peak, and then as the whole sort of gold boom ended in September of 2020, the stock faded back, and Peter eventually got upset with the company, gave up on it, told everybody to sell, and it crashed back down to around 60 cents, where I caught the falling knife, watched it go down to 30 cents after that. What Peter hadn't understood was that IAMGOLD was very distracted by its Côté project in Ontario, which is a very large, low-grade open pit operation that was suffering cost overruns. So it wasn't in a hurry to push the Nelligan project to the next stage, which would be a PEA, an economic study. And it also wasn't very aggressively pushing the limits of the system to find out, how big does this get, so that we have an idea of what sort of scale to do an economic study on. And the stock sort of faded away. And at the end of 2021, I realized, this thing's going to take a while. And I made it part of my bottom fish collection. I've had them as one of my picks at the Metals Investor Forum several times. I've done my own outcome visualization using numbers from a similar deposit, First Mining's Spring Pole project in Ontario. And today, when I run it at those numbers, I get about a $1.9 billion Canadian NPV, and that translates into a future, $5 stock price for Vanstar, based on the 75 million or so shares that it has fully diluted right now. Of course, it doesn't even have an economic study yet, so the fair value is low. But assuming that they did a economic study, a PEA, which firmed up the numbers that I have and showed that something like this, and by the way, at the start of this year, IAMGOLD did update the resource estimate. They dropped the grade a bit from 1.02 grams per ton to 0.87 for both the inferred and indicated, but the resource got up to 5.2 million ounces, and it's got a scale now to support an 18-year mine life. So this is a solid project. This year, the IAMGOLD did do a 10,000 meter drill program that wrapped up recently. There are no assays in. It was pushing the boundaries of the system. This wasn't more infill drilling, so it was doing what everybody hoped to do. Nobody, of course, cared this year because it's been a terrible year for the market in general. But Vanstar, not by the end of this year, but maybe next year, it might graduate to the to a favorite when it lifts off this 30 to 35 cent price right now. But the new thing that's become interesting, which I've done a bit of a write-up about in the last few days, is back in 2020 when Guy Morissette was still running the company, and he was the founder behind Vanstar when he got it launched in 2009. He recognized that it could be a long time before anything happens on the IM Gold side. And of course, with a 20% carried interest, the obvious destination for Vanstar is that IM Gold makes an offer to take out a Vanstar and its 20% interest. But it's been in no hurry to do so. So the stock has gone sideways since the Peter Grandich promotion ended, and it fell back into this 30 to 40 cent range. But back then, Guy Morissette staked several projects in in Quebec, which he thought might have potential for a similar new Nelligan-style mineralization, and he hoped that if the company could drill these and get a quick discovery on a 100% basis, that could get the stock up over $1 into the $1 to $2 range based on 100% ownership. And with regard to like the outcome visualization that I was saying, if my numbers of like 1.9 billion Canadian as an NPV is reality, at the stage of where it moves to a PFS, the sort of fair price would be sort of $1.50 to $2.50 for Vanstar, and that's what one might hope to get a bid at from IM Gold. But when the stock's at 30 cents, that's not going to happen. So one of the problems always for a major is they're never going to get the stock when it's that cheap, and so there's no point making an offer, and they can't sit there and offer five times the price of the stock, because then its own shareholders will crucify it. And in the case of IM Gold, its backers had been pretty angry about the cost overruns, and so its hands were tied. But of these three projects, Vanstar drilled one of them, which did not yield particularly interesting results, but one that they did a sampling program on, Amanda, has suddenly become very interesting. And Amanda is about 65 kilometers northeast of the Whabouchi, also known as the Nemaska lithium project, and it's north of a property called Auclair, which Virginia Gold had started exploring in 1997 through 2010 as a gold prospect. And the Auclair project ended up inside Osisko Development when it acquired Virginia Mines. And of course, Virginia Mines acquired it when Goldcorp bought out Virginia Gold for the Eleanor project, and all the James Bay assets were spun out as a new company. Well, one of the interesting things about the Auclair area was that, unlike with other areas like Plex, which has been optioned by Brunswick Exploration, or at least the critical mineral rights have been optioned by Brunswick, when they drilled their gold targets, and they never really found anything fantastic in terms of gold, they did document that they had intersected pegmatite, but they actually logged it as spodumene bearing. But this was in the 2000s when nobody cared about lithium. 2005, it was a $200 million a year market, so you didn't waste any money assaying this stuff. But yes, in this area, there are documented spodumene bearing pegmatite intervals. And when Guy Morissette staked this, he couldn't care a rat's ass about the lithium at the time. It was for the gold potential. And when Vanstar did a sampling program a year or so ago, it was also just focused on the gold, not yet thinking lithium. But what had happened with Guy Morissette, he sort of got bounced out of the Vanstar. He's associated with another company called Mosaic Minerals, which he was briefly a CEO of in 2021, but he's the kind of behind the scenes string puller. He's got a CEO that's more a placeholder than a real CEO. And he said, let's pivot this company into the battery metal space. They picked up some lousy nickel project in southern Quebec where they're still spending money proving that it's not worth anything. But they also, in late 2022, started staking lithium projects in the James Bay region, also in the southern part of Quebec. But the last thing they did was convince Vanstar to option them the Amanda project, where they can earn 50% by spending $1 million over 3 years and issuing 4 million shares. And why did Vanstar farm this out? Well, Vanstar is branded as a yellow gold company. Its treasury is down to $2 million. Its shareholders understand that you don't want to issue much more paper and build up the fully diluted, because that reduces the price IAM Gold will eventually pay. But they're also frustrated that it's such a dog stuck in my bottom fish collection forever in that 30 to 40 cent range, even though people can do the numbers and say it maybe should be trading in the 50 cents to $1 range while we wait for IAM Gold. So I said, well, why don't you farm this out to these guys and let them see if there's anything there. And this deal, although it's an easy deal, they did it in a smart way. Normally, when you do a deal, a company vests for 50%, then they have the option to go to 80% by spending more money. Well, in this case, Vanstar retained the right to decide, we'll form a 50-50 JV with you and pay our share, or we'll let you go to 80 cents by doing whatever it takes to deliver a 43-101 estimate by 2030. So this gives them the option to actually have 50-50, 50% of this project. So this year, of course, they're supposed to, they did the deal rather late. Vanstar itself wasn't going to do anything. The forest fire closures prevented Mosaic from doing anything on any of its other projects, in particular the Mirabelli, which is west of the Allchem's Galaxy Sear project. But they did manage in the second half of October to put boots on the ground. The boots on the ground weren't equipped with an XRF unit, and they also weren't equipped with a QP qualified to recognize a spodumene in the field. But they did collect 100 samples from the various outcrops that were documented in the past on this property, which is about 8,000 hectares. It's this rectangular east-west oriented property. So it's not a very large property, but the trend of these pegmatites seems to be in a northeast direction, and sort of they cut through the property. Now, we don't know what these are going to assay, but the fact that we know this is a fertile area for the LCT type pegmatites, there's a good chance that by the end of the year they will have decent assays demonstrating that some of these outcropping pegmatites deserve to have drill holes in it. Now, why does this matter to Vanstar right now? Mosaic itself will have no money at the end of the year. It will have to raise money, and really mobilizing a drill program in the first quarter. Guy Morissette likes to say he plans to do this if results justify and he can raise the money. But what really makes this project interesting is that the Auclair project property itself, back in February, Osisko Development decided it would option 100% to an Australian company called Cygnus Metals. Now, Cygnus Metals showed up in the James Bay region in the middle of last year. So this is an Australian-listed company, and it recognized the potential of James Bay. It had already switched from gold to lithium in Australia, but it saw that James Bay was an emerging area. They optioned the Pontax project, which is a dike-based system from Stria Lithium. They actually delivered, a couple of months ago, finally delivered a maiden resource estimate. It's about 10 million tons of 1.02% lithium oxide. It doesn't have the critical mass. It has the grade, but not the critical mass. And they probably already knew at the time that this was probably not going to grow big enough to really move the needle, because as they say now, we want a 50 million ton plus system between 1% and 2%. We want a Patriot battery metal CV5 type of system. So they managed to option this on pretty easy upfront terms from Osisko Development, into which Osisko Gold had stuffed all the Virginia Mines assets, and a bunch of future milestone payments. And they subsequently staked a big area around the Amanda block and optioned from Canadian Mining House or some other groups the various claims that others had staked before the Cygnus showed up on the scene. And so they now have along a 50-kilometer trend, a 35,000 hectare land position, very substantial land position, covering this trend. And the work they've been doing this summer has been confirming that, yes, there are these outcropping spodumene-bearing dikes. This whole area is fertile. And the Amanda property sits smack in the middle of this property. They are surrounded by Cygnus Metals' Auclair project on all sides except to the west, which probably doesn't matter. So Cygnus Metals is now waiting for all its results, and it's contemplating doing a drill program in the first quarter that has an all-access weather road. And if they decide to go ahead and do this, this will be one of the significant drill plays happening in the first quarter of 2024. And if Mosaic manages to get back decent values and gets the market excited and raises some money, it might also be able to drill some of its more exposed outcrops, if those turn out to be the LCT type, and also start showing what's there. Is Amanda big enough to be standalone? Probably not. It's this kind of piece of land in the middle of a bigger trend, which Cygnus Metals, if it shows that this is a major field with 1% plus and tens of millions of tons of pegmatite potential, down the road there will be a deal where it acquires the Amanda project. And so this is a potential non-dilutive future financing, especially useful for Vanstar to help it, continue this waiting game with IAM Gold on the Nelligan project, and for Mosaic, if it manages to, if Cygnus demonstrates that this is a major pegmatite field, and Mosaic itself shows that yes, and we are part of this trend, and it is something that Cygnus has to have, it may end up getting a windfall non-dilutive financing, which would allow it next year to tackle very forcefully its other properties in the James Bay region, of which the Mirabelli project is the most important. So Vanstar, this is a very positive development, which they probably weren't thinking too hard about when Guy Morissette staked this in 2020. But while we're in this waiting game for IAM Gold to decide to do something, and maybe next year, after they receive these results, after they get Cote in production, and maybe gold finally breaks through $2,000 and makes everybody look like a genius who developed a gold deposit during this period, maybe the stock will even start going up on the basis of, now IAM Gold serious. Now it's time to start counting the time by which, how long it's going to take for IAM Gold to get serious and make an offer. But the beauty of this Amanda project is, if it's still evolving, not quite there as a confirmed discovery, this could become a spin-out for Vanstar, to allow it to survive and still have a piece of the middle of this emerging Auclair field that Cygnus Metals is developing.
Why did the market ignore news from Scandium Mining International that construction has started at Nyngan?
Well, the market was surprised to see this press release where they announced that they were going to start putting trailers on the property and start figuring out where the boundaries of buildings were going to be. And but it really didn't sound very serious. In fact, my own feeling was, are they creating a set for an Australian version of the Trailer Park Boys? Is this what they're setting up there? They're going to film an Australian series of all these crazy guys like Ricky, doing nuts stuff in a trailer park setting. The reason the market didn't take this seriously is that the Nyngan definitive feasibility study was completed in 2016, on the basis of which they got the mining lease in 2017. By now, those numbers are stale. Even numbers that were published, say, 2 or 3 years ago in 2020, with the inflation that we've experienced since then, all those economic studies are stale. So until they redo their feasibility study for Nyngan, they're not. nobody's going to believe them that they're actually going to start construction on what was supposed to be a $90 million capex. It's probably 25 to 40% higher at this stage. Who knows what has happened to OPEX? But there is reason to start, showing that we're not going to wait forever. Last week I mentioned that with Robert Friedland's comments about nickel and cobalt, it probably means that the nickel cobalt resource of the Sunrise project is dead. He may pivot back to the scandium enriched portion that started it all off back in 2015. And Rio Tinto's been working on developing the market using the byproduct supply from Sorel Tracy, and the scandium market could reach a tipping point. But this week I was also intrigued by an article in the Financial Times, and the Financial Times seems to be really in love with this idea that Toyota is going to enter the electric vehicle sector with major force. And this article talked about the so-called gigacasting innovation that Tesla has developed for making its Tesla cars. And it's different from what Toyota does. When Toyota developed its way of manufacturing cars, it involved this way of, instead of an assembly line, bunch of workers there adding pieces as the car goes by, you would have the whole team working with the car, doing the different phases of assembling the car until it was done. But what Elon Musk has done through Tesla is develop this casting of much larger aluminum components, which multiple teams can simultaneously work on at the same time as the car is being built, and then finally put all these modular pieces together. For example, the undercarriage of the car could be one big cast aluminum part. Now, aluminum casting is an innovation frontier, and the article said that Toyota is looking very hard at it. And back in 2020, one of the groups that Scandium Mining International, when George Putnam was still involved with, was working with, was Eck Industries, and the head there was David Weiss, and they were developing an alloy for the casting space involving aluminum, magnesium, and interestingly, cerium, and then they were spiking it with zirconium and scandium to give it those extra properties. Now, cerium is interesting because the rare earth stats from the USGS last year showed that 300,000 tons of rare earths were produced globally. Now, based on the typical distribution of rare earths and light rare earth dominated deposits such as carbonatites, probably 40 to 50% of that supply is cerium. And cerium is now 99 cents a kilo in FOB terms and 75 cents a kilo in China domestic terms. Nobody needs this stuff. It's used for helping with glass polishing, but there's only so much glass polishing that needs to be done. So here is this necessary byproduct of processing a rare earth deposit to get at the valuable neodymium and praseodymium magnet rare earths, which typically are 80 to 90% of a light rare earth deposit's value. This stuff, along with lanthanum, is being produced as a byproduct, and you can't avoid recovering it because it drops out as part of the mixed oxide powder when you precipitate it out, and then you have to do another stage of separation to tease apart these different rare earth oxides to get the neodymium, the praseodymium that you need for your rare earth markets. So right now, last year there would have been about 150,000 tons of cerium oxide produced, and when the IEA predicting that by 2030 we're going to need double the amount of magnet rare earths, well, that means it's going to have to produce 600,000 tons. That means 300,000 tons of cerium going nowhere. So cerium is this metal that's screaming for a new application. So what if what Eck Industries has been doing with the aluminum, magnesium, cerium-based alloy has worked, and perhaps you can spice it with some scandium. This could end up being a large-scale consumer of scandium, where the price is so, while it's high for the individual per unit, the incremental contribution to the alloy is small. So this is just me speculating, but I'm saying that maybe there is a future for scandium supply if these push by groups like Toyota and Tesla into aluminum casting parts for the electric vehicle future really gains traction, and they start sniffing out these alloys that EC Industries has produced, and they start using this cerium, which is going to be a stable metal price with, more supply than they'll ever need for this application, so they don't have to worry about getting that cranked to the moon. And then the scandium, well, we've got the Owendale project, we've got the Nyngan project, we've got the Syerston and Sunrise Metals. All of these are primary scalable with grades in the sort of 300 to 600 ppm range. So maybe we are on the threshold of a future, and it's perhaps possible that Scandium Mining International, to keep its lease alive, had to show that it's doing something and doing the very basics of outlining where the buildings are going to go. Maybe that will keep the regulators happy and not revoke the lease because nothing's done. But maybe the timing is also such that something will finally happen in terms of scandium demand taking off.
John, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
I'm Jim Goddard. Comments made on Kaiser Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as a recommendation to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at kaiserresearch.com.